I've had quite a few people on social media ask me about Helenius versus Duhaupas, which happened last night. So I wanted to do a quick video on it. Firstly, a bit of a disclaimer, I haven't seen the full fight. I haven't been able to actually find a copy of the full fight. So if anyone's got a link to that, please do leave that in the comment sections below. In the absence of that, what I've done, obviously I've watched the knockout, which has, become a bit of a viral video if you're on a boxing Facebook group and that sort of thing. I've also watched an extended highlights package, which isn't vast, but gives you a brief indication of the action in each and every round. And let me say, this fight is, in many ways, it's a disappointing result, because Duhaupas won fair and square, don't get me wrong. But Duhaupas, or Duhaupas, whatever you want to call him, he is for me a guy who is firmly outside the top 15 in the world. And to be honest, having watched him fight a few times, I don't genuinely believe he's got the capability to move from that sort of top 30, top 40 level through to top 20, top 15. He's a guy who's a decent fighter, he's solid enough, he's got some tools, but he doesn't have the upside of a fighter who is going to get to the top, in my humble opinion. So it's unfortunate in that sense that Helenius lost, because Helenius has been quite a hyped prospect throughout the early stages of his career. He's a guy with a high knockout percentage. He's very, very big, and he was undefeated, and he looked like a guy who was potentially moving back in the right direction, having had an extended break from the sport. And I think this is an instance where talent potentially has been wasted. Because if you look at Robert Helenius, he's actually if you look at even some of the stuff he was doing in this fight, he was boxing fairly smart. I was impressed by his work to the body in this fight. Clearly, we know Helenius has got good long 1-2, but if you notice this fight against Johann Duhaupas, Helenius was doing good early work to the body. I was also really impressed by the uppercut of Robert Helenius in this fight. Several times you'll notice Helenius land the uppercut on Duhaupas, and these are big, hurtful shots. That uppercut had the potential to be a real weapon in the heavyweight division. And you could see Helenius throwing it long from range. You could also see him throwing a slightly shorter uppercut as well. And it's a useful punch. And you could see in the early rounds, Helenius was carrying some real snap in his punches. And to be honest, I've seen this before with Helenius. If you look at that Franz Rill fight, for example, which went 12, in the early rounds he looked like a real dangerous fighter, a danger to all. But after the first few rounds, he kind of resorted to following his opponent around the ring and picking him off with a jab and winning the fight with sort of slow-paced range fighting. And he seemed to have lost that dynamic element to his game after the first few rounds. And Johann Duhaupas, what he brings to the table, he's a tough guy. He's got an excellent chin, excellent durability, as he showed in that Deontay Wilder fight. He's also got a jab, and it's not a special jab, but if you allow him to hit you with the jab, he uses the jab and he uses it well. It's not a Vladimir Klitschko-esque jab. It's not got that speed or that snap or that range. But one thing about him is he knows to use it. A lot of fighters don't use the jab as much as they should do. Duhaupas uses his jab, he looks to utilise it, he looks to work off it, he looks to throw shots off it, and he's relatively accurate with it. And quite early on in this fight, it was obvious that Johann Duhaupas was trying to get that jab going. He was backing Helenius up, he was coming straight forward, peppering with that jab and trying to work shots off it. And the Helenius defence was slightly leaky. I mean, we've always heard Robert Helenius has got an excellent chin. And that was tested last night, and unfortunately it didn't fail past the test. When we got towards the middle rounds of this fight, rounds 4, 5, 6, to my eye, Helenius was still doing some good work. There was a noticeable decrease in the speed, and as a result, in the snap behind his punches. And that kind of encouraged Duhaupas a bit, and it allowed Duhaupas to come forward, to put his head down, to push the pace a bit more. And Helenius got involved into a bit of a scrap. He negated his range, he gave up his range, he gave up his long boxing, and he got involved into, or I guess you could say that it became a slightly messy scrap. And when that happened, things didn't end well for him, as you've probably all seen by now. And Duhaupas works off that jab, lands a big cross, hits him in the nose, it's a broken nose, and Helenius goes straight back, and it's a bad knockout. He gets to his feet on about 8 or 9. At when I first saw it, I thought maybe he'd get back up. But when he does get to his feet at 9, he's all over the place. He looks like he's had 10 pints of Guinness or whatever they drink in Finland. Yeah, he is wandering all over the ring. And it's a bad loss because Robert Helenius, you know, he's no spring chicken anymore. He was in against a much smaller man. He was in against the guy who's known as quite a light puncher, actually. Johann Duhaupas is not known as one of the big punchers of the game. And really, Johann Duhaupas was able to negate some of the stuff that Robert Helenius brought to the table, and you know, at times was able to outbox him and pick the shots. And you know, if you're getting knocked out by Johann Duhaupas, it doesn't bode well for future fights against the top of the division. So things aren't looking too hot for Robert Helenius right now. And to be honest, the writing's been on the wall for some time. You know, I know Helenius looked very good maybe on the way up, and he was much hyped by the Sauerlands, and he had a big support in, you know, his region of the world. But the Derek Chisora fight, you know, I was one of the very, very few who actually scored that fight to Helenius. But let's put it this way, Derek Chisora was able to get inside his jab and cause him all sorts of bother. The Michael Sprott fight was even more telling. You know, Michael Sprott, at that point, you know, nothing more than journeyman material at the end of his career, I thought gave Helenius all sorts of bother in that fight. And whilst Helenius deserved to win the fight, I think it was a 10-rounder, and Michael Sprott won 3 or 4 rounds convincingly, and looked like if he'd been a year or 2 younger, he could have taken Helenius. But, you know, I was hopeful that after a break and coming back, Helenius was, you know, going to be a renewed force in the heavyweight division. And this fight against Johann Duhaupas now puts all doubts in the future of his career. Yeah, Helenius looked slightly lumbering, slightly awkward, slightly slow. And whilst he is a fighter who's going to be a danger to all in the first couple of rounds, you wonder if he's someone who you can outbox and hurt if you can take him past the first 3 or 4. I also wonder if stylistically there's some similarities between him and David Price, in the sense that he's quite good from range with a long 1-2. But if you get inside that jab, you know, if you try and fight him on the inside, if you try and fight him in the pocket, he doesn't necessarily have the most instinctive defence, you know, at that point, and he doesn't react too well. I think the final thing is Robert Helenius is a very, very, very big guy, and he's not instantly athletic. You know, he's not athletic in the same way an Anthony Joshua is or a Vladimir Klitschko is. He's also not sort of lean and light on his feet like a peak Tyson Fury is. And don't get me wrong, I know Tyson Fury blows up in weight, but you know, a peak Tyson Fury can dance around the ring and get up on his toes, and as can a Luis Ortiz, for example. Yeah, Helenius I see as a bit more of a flat-footed, heavy, plodding guy. And if you allow opponents to get inside your jab, and if you're flat-footed and heavy and plodding, you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable, especially if you're not very elite at closing down opponents on the inside. So it's going to be a long way back for Helenius. I understand he's a big star in Scandinavia. I understand he sells pay-per-views over there. I understand the fight last night was on pay-per-view. You know, the arena, from what I could see, didn't look like a sellout arena. There seemed to be a lot of empty seats. But I have been told in the past that Robert Helenius is a ticket seller. So, you know, we'll have to see. We'll have to see where he goes from here. You know, I guess he's still got some name recognition, but it's not many people are going to be picking him to get to world title level. Maybe position himself back at European title level, trying to throw himself back into the mix with a Chisora or one of those guys, or a Kubrat Pulev could be a good move for him. You know, because I think he possibly needs the big fight sooner rather than later and needs to get straight back on the horse. The other thing I say is Adrian Granat is a heavyweight from Scandinavia who's seemingly very much on the rise at present. You know, he's knocking a lot of people out. He looks like a good fighter from what I've seen of him. Clearly he's a fighter who hasn't fought the Tier A or even Tier B opposition yet. And yeah, maybe that's a fight that domestically in Scandinavia would generate some interest. And to be honest, having seen the fight last night, you'd have to say that Granat would start that fight as a favourite. So yeah, long road back for Helenius. Fair play to Johann Duhaupas. I don't know where this positions Duhaupas. Some people were saying maybe he could be an Anthony Joshua opponent. I still don't see him as that marketable after this fight, and I still personally don't see Duhaupas as moving into the top 20 heavyweights. He's there or thereabouts, but you know, this is the biggest win of his career by far. And typically, he's come up short when stepping up in grade. So, you know, fair play to him. Big win for him. Maybe we can see him in another fight of note, and yeah, maybe I will have to revise my opinion if he does that to someone else. But for now, you know, just because it's one knockout, I'm not going to necessarily assume that Johann Duhaupas has developed devastating power. I'm going to put it more down to Robert Helenius, lack of defence and lack of fitness, lack of stamina, lack of conditioning, however you want to phrase it. So let me know your thoughts on this fight, guys. Was it one you found interesting? Where did both guys go from here? If you've enjoyed this video, please do hit the thumbs up button. Please do subscribe to the channel. I'm going to try and watch Adamek, Eric Molina and the Adrian Broner Ashley Fearfane fight, and I'm going to do videos on those shortly, so do subscribe. I wouldn't want you to miss out on those. The UK fights, Callum Smith, Rocky Fielding, Scott Cardle, I did a video on them last night. That's up on the channel. Please do check that out. Thanks for watching, guys.